Hey guys, welcome to Kludgy Tech Time. I'm David, and this is part 3 of our Autel Evo series. You can find parts 1 and 2 in the description down below or up here in the corner. In parts 1 and 2, we had a great interview with Jacob from Autel Robotics, where he told us all kinds of information about the Evo. In part 2, we find out more information about the Evo and its future release, as well as taking it for a flight. Now in part 2, we showed you footage recorded from the Evo itself, but that was shown to you on YouTube in 1080p 30 frames per second, whereas it was actually recorded on the Evo in 4K 60 frames per second. So for part 2, it was downscaled to fit that video. Now in this video is going to be published to YouTube in 4K 60 frames per second. So make sure that you're adjusting your settings in YouTube to get the full 4K experience on this video. So the first thing we need to cover is we need to put out a correction. So in part 2, we talked about color profiles, and I had mentioned that the Evo does not have any color profiles. That is actually not accurate, and Autel provided me with updated information after that was published. So this is what they say. They say the Evo does offer color profiles and has a log profile for users looking to do post-production coloring. So there is color profiles for those of you guys who are looking to do post-processing color correction. So that is good news. For those of you guys who are just here for the footage, skip ahead to this timestamp right here and you'll go basically directly to the footage. For those of you guys who want more information about the Evo, let's talk about some of the common comments and questions that came up during the part 1 and part 2. By far and away, the most common comments in part 2 had to do with the picture quality. So two major things were people commenting about the horizon being tilted as well as the props being in the footage. I asked Jacob about these things, and he just wanted to remind everybody that this is a demo unit. It's still part of the prototype system, and it is not the final production unit. So it does not have the final design of the arms, does not have the final design of the propellers, and of course it does not have the final firmware updates and software updates. So what you're seeing there is, you know, a prototype and a early demo version. It is not the final version. In my opinion, I think we have to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, and that they are addressing these things for the final design. Now, one of the things I'll mention from my perspective is that you just need to keep in mind that this is a demo unit that was being shown at conferences and all kinds of demonstrations, and who knows what people have done to it. So the fact that it had some horizon tilt is not necessarily all that surprising, because people are throwing it around, manhandling, doing whatever. One of the other common questions was in regards to what frame rates does it support. In 4K, it supports 24, 25, 30, 50, and 60 frames per second. Now, of course, one of the common questions that came up was in regards to how loud it is. Now, you probably heard my first impressions were during the video were that it was quiet. But it's really hard to quantify how quiet it is without having another device there to be able to compare it against it. And in a similar environment, similar location, all that kind of stuff. I can say it did sound very quiet. I did fly my Maverick Air about 15 minutes after Jacob left, and to me, just subjectively, it's hard to compare, but the Maverick Air was much louder in my opinion. Now, is it quieter than a Maverick Pro Platinum? Is it as quiet? That's hard to say. I didn't have one there to be able to compare it or anything, but my guess is that it's probably in a similar classification in terms of sound, but that's just a guess. Then, of course, there are the when, where, and why questions that crop up in different forms, but they're all basically the same questions. When is it going to be available? I don't know the answer to that. Nobody knows that outside of Autel. They're not giving that information out. Jacob did say in a few weeks. I also saw that he had, in another interview, had said that it's in production now. So I can't answer that. Nobody knows that for sure, and until they make a big announcement, it is what it is, right? My guess is, my gut says it's going to be sometime in June, but that's just a guess. That's nothing that anybody has told me. That's just a complete guess. The where question is something we talked about in part 2, and specifically it's going to be targeted to the US. If you live somewhere outside of the US, the chances of you seeing it early on are pretty slim. They don't have CE certification for Europe, so it's initially not going to be targeted there. Now, questions are, Canada, here, there, whatever. I don't have the answers to that. I apologize. My best guess for you is to look to see, are they selling the X-Star in your country? If they're selling the X-Star in your country, then I think there's probably a good chance that they will be selling the Evo in your country as well. So I think that's the best answer, is look to see where they're selling the X-Star currently. And just for clarification, that isn't an answer that Autel gave me. That is my speculation in terms of those other countries. They did not tell me, but I think it's probably a pretty good guess. Now to the $1,000 question, why should I buy an Evo? Now, I can't answer that specifically for you, just like I can't tell a Ford guy that he should buy a Chevy, or a Chevy guy you should buy a Ford, or an Android guy you should buy an iPhone, or an iPhone guy you should buy an Android, blah, 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 right? Some people are just set on something, and that's what they want, and that's what they're going to buy. So there's going to be a certain crowd that is just going to buy DJI no matter what Autel does, and there's also going to be a certain segment that's going to buy an Autel just because it is not DJI. Now, I think one of the biggest reasons is that I think the Evo is just going to be a good, solid camera drone that's going to do a lot of the things that most people want. Right? So it will be a valid competitor. Now, will DJI come out with a bigger, better, smaller, faster, better Maverick Pro 2 or something like that? I think so, right? At some point, DJI is going to come out with a Maverick Pro 2. But I think to a certain segment of the population, it doesn't matter. They just don't want a DJI. And whether that's because they don't want the establishment, they don't want them because they are a 100% Chinese company, they don't want them because of a bad experience, there's going to be a certain segment that is just going to buy an Autel because it's a good camera drone that is not DJI. That's just how it is. Will it have every single feature? Will it be able to do everything better than some future drone that comes out? I don't know. I guess we'll see what the Maverick Pro 2 or some future version of Mavic comes out, or some other company comes out with. You just never know. But I think when Evo is released, I think it's going to be a very good camera drone. And I think that's what people are going to like about it. Now, I think one of the reasons people are going to buy the Autel Evo is because Autel has a good reputation for having great service. They have people based here in the US that are supporting the product. Of course, the product is going to be marketed almost 100% here for the US market, and the fact that they have support staff here in the US, I think there's going to be a certain segment of the population that is really going to appreciate that. Now, some companies may have a reputation in some segments that they don't have the greatest service. Now, I personally have had great service from DJI. When I had two different problems, I had great service from them, but I know that that's not necessarily the case with everybody. And so I think there's going to be a certain segment that's going to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with that. I want to deal with this company who has a stellar reputation for service. So I think those are just a few of the reasons why people might choose the Evo. I think there's a lot of reasons why people may choose not to buy an Evo. So I guess the question of the day is, why would you buy the Autel Evo? Now, regardless of whether you personally would choose an Evo over some of the competition, I personally think that having Autel in the market and being a viable competitor is great for the market. It's good for you, it's good for me, it's good for the industry in general. It'll help push everybody to get better. And it's also good for the competitors that are involved in the market. If there is only DJI in the market, then DJI doesn't have as much incentive to push the boundaries and create new features and get better drones. Of course, they're going to do that, but will they do it at the same pace they would if they have a viable competitor? So when talking about competition, look at the Maverick Pro. Would we have seen the Maverick Pro when we saw the Maverick Pro had GoPro not put out the Karma? I personally don't think so. I think DJI would have held on to that a bit longer, would have kept revising it and getting it better and better, and then released it, rather than releasing it when they did. And I think that having Autel in the market might help DJI continue to push forward with new products. All right, so now to the 4K 60 frame per second footage from the Evo. Now remember, again, not the production arms, not the production propellers, not the final production firmware, and just two dudes in a park flying around and having a chat. So hope you enjoy this. Catch you next time.